Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where our main goal is to completely demystify Layer 2 Switchport Security. If you've ever wondered how network administrators keep rogue devices off their local area networks, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down exactly how you can implement Switchport Security and turn your network switches into vigilant bouncers that meticulously check the credentials of every single device trying to connect to your infrastructure.
Here is our quick agenda for the explainer. First, we'll look at the open port threat. Second, core concepts of port security. Third, configuring allowed MAC addresses. Fourth, enforcing rules with violation modes. And finally, verifying those port security operations.
Section 1. The open port threat.
So I want you to think about this question for a second. What actually happens when a complete stranger just walks in and plugs a device into your network? Picture this, an unattended network jack in a corporate lobby, or maybe an empty conference room. Without any security in place, literally anyone can come along and plug in a personal laptop, a rogue wireless access point, or even a mini hub that connects a bunch of unauthorized devices straight into your local area network. That active unsecured switch port, it's basically an unlocked backdoor to your entire enterprise. We absolutely need a way to lock it down. And this concept right here brilliantly illustrates the exact solution we're looking for. Think of the switch port as a strict bouncer at an exclusive club. When port security is active, this bouncer actively observes the devices trying to connect. Host B? Well, they're on the guest list, so their traffic gets a green light. Host A, on the other hand, is completely unrecognized. The bouncer denies access and drops the traffic right there at the port level, stopping the threat before it ever even enters the network. So you might be wondering, how does this bouncer actually know who's on the guest list?
Let's look into that in Section 2, Core Concepts of Port Security.
Here's the formal definition. Port security is essentially a Cisco switch feature that tracks the source MAC addresses of incoming Ethernet frames on an interface. It then takes a predefined security action if the number of unique MAC addresses exceeds a maximum limit that you've configured. Going back to our club metaphor, the MAC address is basically the ID card. The switch looks at every incoming frame, checks that source MAC address against its approved list, and if it sees an ID card it doesn't recognize, or honestly, if it sees way too many unique IDs for that single port, it immediately triggers a security violation.
Now, building that specific guest list can be done in a couple of ways. You could use a static MAC entry, which means you're manually typing the exact 48-bit MAC address into the switch configuration. It's super controlled, for sure, but let's be honest, finding and typing out every single MAC address across a massive campus, that is painstaking work. Alternatively, you can use what's called a sticky MAC entry. This is an absolutely brilliant feature where the switch dynamically learns the MAC address of the very first device that connects and then automatically writes that specific address directly into the running configuration. It's kind of like the bouncer remembering the very first person who walks through the door and immediately writing their ID down in permanent ink so they're the only one allowed back in. So let's see how this all comes together in Section 3, Configuring Allowed MAC Addresses. Okay, when you're actually in the terminal configuring an interface, there's a really logical 4-step procedural checklist you're going to want to follow. Step 1, you have to explicitly set the port to either access or trunk mode. This is crucial because port security just won't work if the port is actively trying to negotiate its state. Step 2, you actually enable the port security feature itself. Step 3, you define the maximum allowed MAC addresses, basically setting the size of your guest list. And finally, Step 4, you set the violation mode, which dictates exactly what the switch should do if a rule gets broken. Connecting those conceptual steps to the actual Cisco CLI commands, it looks exactly like this. First up, switch port mode access statically sets the port type. Then the simple command switchport port security turns the feature on. Now by default, the maximum number of allowed MAC addresses is just 1, but it is highly recommended best practice to explicitly state it anyway with switchport port security maximum 1. This literally means a second unique source MAC address will immediately trigger a violation. Finally, we use switchport port security MAC address sticky to tell the switch to dynamically learn and save that one allowed MAC address permanently. All right, guest list is configured. But what happens when an uninvited guest actually tries to crash the party?
That brings us to Section 4, Enforcing Rules with Violation Modes. Now, what's really fascinating here is how the switch escalates its response depending on the specific mode you choose. Notice that all 3 port security violation modes, protect, restrict, and shutdown, they all discard the offending traffic immediately. But look closely at how they differ in their secondary actions. Protect simply drops the bad frame silently. No logs, no counters incrementing, nothing. Restrict mode drops the frames but makes a lot of noise, sending syslog messages and incrementing a violation counter. And then there's shutdown mode, which does all of that, plus it takes the ultimate step of completely disabling the interface.
Let's zoom in on that shutdown mode for a second, because this is actually the default setting on Cisco switches. When a violation occurs in shutdown mode, the port is placed into what is called an air-disabled state. This is a massively important concept to grasp. The bouncer hasn't just blocked the guy, they've literally bolted the door shut. The port stops forwarding all traffic completely, both in and out. To fix this, an administrator usually has to manually go into the CLI, issue a shutdown command, and then a no shutdown command just to reset it.
Now, if completely shutting down a port and waiting for manual intervention seems a bit too aggressive for your environment, restrict mode provides a fantastic compromise. In restrict mode, the interface stays up and fully operational. The switch just silently discards the bad traffic from the unauthorized MAC address while continuing to happily forward traffic from the authorized one. Plus, it increments a security violation counter and sends SNMP traps and syslog messages, so you still have a highly visible logged tally of all those offending frames for your security audits. It's kind of the best of both worlds.
Let's wrap things up with Section 5, Verifying Port Security Operations. So we've configured our security, we've set our allowed MACs, and we've chosen our violation mode. But how do we prove it actually works in the real world? The crucial point is knowing exactly which show commands to use to peek under the hood. To see the detailed status of a specific interface, including its violation mode and how many times a violation has occurred, you're going to use Show Port Security Interface followed by the interface ID. But if you want to view the actual allowed MAC addresses, you have to be careful. Port Security MAC addresses will not show up in the standard dynamic address table. Instead, you've got to use Show MAC Address Table Secure or Show MAC Address Table Static. The switch treats these secured MACs as static entries, even if they were learned dynamically via the sticky feature. And when you run that Show Port Security Interface command, one of the absolute most important things to look for in the output is the port status. If you see a status of secure shutdown, that right there is your ultimate proof. It means your network bouncer did its job flawlessly. It caught a trespasser violating the rules, blocked them, and successfully placed the port into the air-disabled state to protect your network. So we've covered the open port threat, the mechanics of MAC address tracking, the precise configuration steps, and exactly how to verify your setup. Now that you understand just how powerful these tools are for implementing Switchport security, I want to leave you with this final thought. How are you going to audit your own network switches to ensure the doors are really locked? Don't let a simple open port be your enterprise network's weakest link. Go apply these practical skills, secure those switch ports, and take absolute control of your network's edge. Thanks for hanging out and learning with me today on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.